Yes, good morning. My name is Thomas Ng. I am the lead executive for BLAT in Southeast Asia. We have done this now since 2018. And I'm here today in Jakarta and meeting up with an old friend, Karyanto, who was instrumental in,
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you again. Was instrumental in taking Danone Aqua to B Corp certification in the early days.
Yeah.
One of the first skill companies, and until today, Danone Aqua is actually the largest B Corp certified company in Southeast Asia. So, but Karyanto, perhaps a little bit of background about yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Thomas. I'm Karyanto. I'm the Director of Sustainability for Danone Indonesia. Been with the company for more than 12 years already. So it's quite some time with Danone. And then, of course, Thomas mentioned about the B Corp. We are one of the early movers of B Corp in Indonesia. We are being certified as a B Corp company in 2018, and then recertified by 2021, and then now we go for the third recertification, which is it's supposed to be approved by next month.
Okay, and congratulations on that third recertification. And what is amazing is that as such a sizable company, first of all, that you get certified. Secondly, is that I note that every year, every recertification, you actually improve your points. So it's really a very, very amazing achievement. If I can just dial back a little bit on what you see as Danone Aqua's role in Indonesia in general.
Before answering your question, just to give you a bit of background of Danone Aqua. Actually, we are a company established in Indonesia more than 50 years ago, 51 actually, in 1973. It was founded by Indonesians who really has a concern about the water in Indonesia, especially access of the safe drinking water in Indonesia. So we are already 51 years. And then we are quite a big company, as you mentioned. We are operating in 20 factories all over Indonesia with in total employee approximate 10,000 of employees working together. So it's quite big company. Of course, back to your questions about the role of Danone Aqua in Indonesia, and then I give you also another context about the Indonesia before I go into the role of Danone Aqua. First, of course, Indonesia is a great country, a big country. It is fourth, I think number 4 in the world in terms of the population, with more than 270 million of population in Indonesia. We are part of the G20. Government has the ambition also to be part of G7 by 2045. It's quite challenging, to be honest. But actually, we still have many challenges in Indonesia. There are many socio-economic and also environment challenges that we have in Indonesia, especially or including water. Many water issues like water scarcity, water availability, water distributions, including also water access, which is linked to, especially linked to safe drinking water. It's quite a complex issue in Indonesia because now, based on the research by 2020, only 11.9 or 12% of Indonesian population, they have access to safe drinking water. So imagine it's only 12%. So, and then at the same time also, other challenges is that 7 out of 10, this is also based on the research recently, 7 out of 10 households in Indonesia, they have contaminated water source, especially E. coli. So it's quite challenging. So another reference that we can have as part of our discussion is that even on top of these conditions, more than 50% of Indonesians, they don't drink enough water, and then 1 out of 4 children in Indonesia, they don't really drink enough water. So this is kind of a complex situations, and then us in Danone Aqua, our role is actually to more on to provide the healthy hydrations as an option or alternative to Indonesian populations through our water, which is our water is has to be definitely high quality in terms of the water to be accessed by Indonesians. So this is basically our role, but on top, our role is not only providing the healthy hydration access for Indonesian, but also giving kind of education for Indonesian populations about the hydration, the importance of the hydrations, why you should or you must drink enough water, what is the implication if you don't drink enough water, affecting to the metabolism of our body, because 70% of our body is consists of water. Impact on the focus on concentration, for example, because like kids when they are at school, when they don't drink enough water, normally they will lack of the focus. This is based on the research as well. So our role is to give kind of education on this topic, at the same time also to educate and also inspire them on what we should do also to taking care of our environment. Because at the end, water is definitely important, but we have to make sure that the sustainability of the water is there. So we are proud to to engage to provide healthy hydration to more than 140 million of Indonesians. Being part of our consumers, and then of course we keen to inspire more and collaborate more with all of our consumers and also our friends.
That's a really commendable kind of a mission for the company, and I remember that growing up, my mother will always tell me, remember to drink water, and in fact today we tell our children the same thing. That's especially when the weather is hot and dehydration can creep up very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But by my word, 140 million consumers, that's huge. And but of course, you have 270 million population, so there's still a ways to go. But you're now the biggest bottled water company in Indonesia, and of course, I mean, it's recognized that there's at the moment there's the only efficient and practical way to distribute water. But what about the issue of the environment and the usage of plastics and all that?
Yes. Definitely. In our business, we connect with nature definitely, because first water is the raw materials that being used by us, and then at the same time also we package the water to be distributed to the consumers all over Indonesia. Which is both actually potentially having kind of an impact to the environment if we don't really think or we don't do really in a responsible way to make sure that we don't really create an impact for the environment. I will share a little bit on what we are doing to minimize the impact, especially on the two topics which is very important. The first is water, and the second one is basically the plastic, especially plastic, because most of our packaging is use plastic. On water, basically, we operate in 17 water sets. I don't know whether most of the people understand about the water set.
No, absolutely not.
But basically, this is the area where where the rain infiltrate into the earth, the aquifer, and then goes to the downstream through the river, this kind of things, until reaching the oceans. Basically, there is kind of a certain area normally in between two kind of either mountain or hill as kind of a border for the water set normally, so that all of the water fall in this area, then it will goes only in this particular area. Of course, in the world there are thousands of water sets all over the world, and then Indonesia we are operate in 17 water sets. And then definitely for us it is very important to ensure the sustainability of the water in the area where we operate. Because we need to make sure that when we do kind of operation, we need to make sure that we don't take more water than the nature can provide or replenish. Even though now, of course, with the increasing of the populations, and then also industrialization, this kind of things, the water that being utilized is getting more and more. So, as I mentioned, it is very important for us to make sure or to contribute to sustainability of the water. First, actually, we need to make sure that we use water responsibly. So, within our operations, we have kind of a target in our operations, what we call it water ratio. What is water ratio? Water ratio means how much water actually you use to produce 1 liter of bottled water. This is what we call it water ratio. Our water ratio is one of the best in class in Indonesia, which is 1.15. So means 1 liter of aqua actually produced using 1.15 liters of water.
Very little waste.
Yeah, little waste. Even the waste actually, it is not just wasted, but we try as much as possible to reuse it. For domestic purposes or some other purpose. I give you an example, like if you drink like a carbonated soft drink, the water ratio could be more than 2. Could be more than 2. Or even you drink a cup of coffee, for example. I mean, the water ratio is very big. 1 cup of coffee, because of the cafe inside, then of course you need more.
What is it you do different that reduces that ratio so dramatically, compared to say carbonated water is 2 and 1.15?
Yeah, because first, as I mentioned, we really optimize the water usage in the factory. How to make sure that we use it responsibly. In all of our operations, we need to make sure that the water is not going to leakage. We are not really wasted of water. We put this kind of a KPI in our operation. This is the water ratio that you have to achieve, and then every year we have to keep improving. So since we measure it since 2015, I give you an idea. 2015 up to now, we measure the water ratio that we reduce, and then it is. And when we are trying to compare to the water that we are able to save, it is equal to 2 factories. So instead of building 2 new factories, by having water reductions, actually we are able to save a lot of water. So we are able to increase the capacity by
So you also increase your profitability. So in a sense that by doing the right thing, you actually make more money.
Exactly. So we don't need to invest in capex and this kind of thing. Okay, first within our factory. The second, actually within our factory as well, we are trying to minimize taking the water from the earth, for example. In our factory, we install what they call it rainwater harvesting. So all of the water actually fall in our roof, factory roof. Actually, we take the water and then we use it for the domestic purposes. Even though perhaps Indonesia is not like other countries, like even Singapore or Middle East, especially Middle East, where the rain is less. But we in order to save the water, also we install the rainwater harvesting. And then the third one is actually how to make sure that we treat the wastewater, and then when we return the water to the ecosystem, it has to be clean according to clean water standard, both Danone and also both the government regulation. So this is the internal. And then now we move to the water set. So the water set where we operate. First, we in an area where we operate, we have comprehensive study, normally conducted by the hydrogeologists, the expert from the university. and it takes a couple of years to really understand the properties of characteristic of the watershed, including also the water capacity, in the aquifer. Takes can be 2 to 3 years to really understand. So with this research, actually, we are able to define the strategy on water conservation, because we will understand where the water is, fall and then infiltrate to the earth in specific area, and then also how long it takes for the water to go up to the area where we operate, and then also the cycle of the rain, this kind of thing. So with this study, then we define the strategy on water conservation on the upstream, because as I mentioned to you, with the growing of the population, the recharge area, the catchment area in the upstream, mostly converted from the forest, converted into the farming, sometimes also converted into the land housing settlement as well. So therefore, of course, the impact, the water infiltrate is becoming less. So we do kind of a tree planting, replanting the tree, or we do the installing the infiltration well, the constructive infiltration well. So means we build a well, and so that the water will not run off, but goes into the well, and at the end goes to the aquifer, this kind of things. And then also in the midstream area, normally there are many agriculture practices like the farming, this kind of thing. There are many farmers, they are still using the chemical pesticide, this kind of thing, that can potentially also affecting the water quality. So we do with our communities to educate them and to also influence them to switch to the more organic and pesticide and this kind of things, and also educate them to reduce the water or to use also the water wisely for the agriculture practices. This is mostly in the midstream area, and then in the downstream area, our initiative is more still on irrigations, farming, this kind of initiative, including also waste treatment. Then after the watershed, we go beyond, which is normally we call it scope 3, which is more on inviting our supply chain, our value chains, to also doing the same as us. So we inspire our suppliers, our partners, and also collaborate with multi-stakeholder partnership to also doing together with us in either in the area where they operate, or also working together with us in the area where we operate. So this is basically more or less the approach, and then we always do kind of a impact measurement. What is the impact that we do? And then we validate working with the research agency in Indonesia. We call it BRIN, or National Research Agency, to do the impact measurement. This is still very first time in Indonesia, and then we want to inspire many also to learn about the impact assessment, because we have the ambition or target to return more water than we take in the area where we operate. So therefore, it is super important to have kind of
how do you achieve that? Do you return more water than you take?
Yeah, I think first we need to understand how much water that we take, right? And then of course we have all of the measurement because it's part of the government regulations, this kind of things. Because we have also to pay tax, and then with all of the initiatives that we have, actually we are able to measure how much water that actually infiltrate or back to the ecosystem. We have the tools to measure. We have the monitoring tools. We have the software to do kind of a modeling, and also to do kind of a recording. Very important to have this kind of tools, so that every year, or of course we are not on calculate every once a year, but it is ongoing monitoring, so that we are able to calculate actually how much water that infiltrate because of us. I mean, because of our initiatives. It's more on kind of quote unquote additionality, because Because if we don't do kind of intervention, then potentially the water will overflow and then becoming run off or potentially becoming a flood in the...
But where would this water come from? I mean, you bottling the water at a very high efficiency, middle waste, and you're going to... And then where does the replenishment of the water come from?
Replenishment coming from the rain.
Okay, so you...
Coming from the rain. This is coming from the rain because of our initiative. For example, like if we plant a tree, normally the tree is small, right? Small, normally there is no impact on the water. But we start measuring once the tree reach at a certain age or height. Maybe after 5 years, then we start calculating the tree, because of our conservation initiative, how much water that actually able to be saved by this tree. Okay, this one. Because actually there is a methodology and also the calculation. Different tree, different impact. Including also, because it is quite technical, even the different slope, if whether it is steep or not, there is also different impact. Different soil, it is also different impact. So there are many parameters but we are able to scientifically measure how much water they actually infiltrate to the aquifer. We also, for example, we built also well. I will show you later the picture. Infiltration well. We built, for example, near the housing complex, so that the water coming from the roof, it does not just go to the river, but actually we do kind of a systematic kind of a route of water. It will go to the well. Of course, we do kind of a treatment to avoid any contamination, and then from the well and then goes to the aquifer. We are able also to measure the impact, how much water. So this is something that actually we are trying to introduce to many stakeholders in Indonesia, so that we have kind of a target or ambitions how much water that actually we take, and we have kind of obligations to, with our initiative, to help return, quote-unquote, return water to the aquifer to refill, I would say, refill the water in the aquifer. Because like we should an example like in Jakarta. Jakarta is sinking every year more or less 20 to 30 centimeters. Jakarta in some part of area of Jakarta actually below sea level already. And then not part of Jakarta. Why it is happening? Because of the excessive groundwater extraction. Because the water in below Jakarta, it is extracted massively, so that at the same time also there are many many building, this kind of things, resulting the land actually sinking. Why this is also happening? Because the water in the aquifer, it is not replenished. It has to be replenished, by the rain coming or falling in the upstream area. Perhaps in Bogor, for example. I don't know exactly where is the catchment area, but can be in Bogor area. The rain in the Bogor area will replenish water in Jakarta. But Bogor is now, changed, right? It's no longer, kind of a forest, or even now it's becoming settlement. There are many villas over there. But we need, so that the water is actually just run off, goes to the river, and then becoming flood in Jakarta. But that water has to be replenished to the aquifer in Bogor, so that it will replenish the water in the aquifer in Jakarta. So this is kind of the concept that we are trying to introduce also to the government. I had some discussion with the Jakarta government, and they are also interested, having this kind of approach. But what I was telling them is more on, let's make sure that everything has to be scientific. We must have kind of a certain KPI which is measurable, and then we are able to do the activity, but we also measure. Otherwise, we just do without knowing what we are going to achieve, where we are, and then this kind of thing.
I thought we are going to spend a lot of time talking about the packaging side, but you've just given a fascinating
even
explanation about the whole, there's the supply side. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So much is big.
Even this is still, to be honest with you, still small part of water. But because even this is to my point of view as well, my personal point of view, that we don't really put more or much attention on water. Because even though water is definitely super important.
Oh, yes.
Super important. We are not able to survive without water in 1 week. But people tend to focus on other topic. I know this is also important, but we need to keep promoting that water is something that we have to address, especially with the climate change issue that we face now.
And also there's a limited water in the whole ecosystem.
Exactly.
The population continues to grow.
Population continue. The water in the world remain the same. Always the same. But the problem is that the water properties is changing because of the water pollution, right? And also the water scarcity, and then water has to becoming flat. It goes to the ocean, which is going to be difficult to be consumed because it is salty. These kind of things, and also the growing of the population. So a very important topic. We have to keep promoting this.
Thank you so much for that. Now, can we move towards talking about packaging there?
Yeah, definitely. Packaging is a very important topic. It's quite a present issue, and then there are many, people, consumers, NGO, government talk about this topic. They will talk about this topic currently, but so far there is no kind of a global consensus yet on the packaging, unlike climate. Because climate, I think the entire world already committed to be net zero by 2050, right? Okay, we go to 2050. This is something that we have to achieve. But packaging, especially plastic, we don't have. But now there is kind of ongoing conversations as part of the UN Convention on INC, which is globally we are trying to reach kind of agreement especially on the plastic, which is ongoing. And then we are also actively try to contribute into these conversations. Of course, why it is important, because now I talk a little bit on Indonesia, because actually it is going to be linked to our business. In Indonesia, every year the total plastic production is about 6.8 million tons. This is only domestic, 6.8 million tons. Only domestic production. Which is only 10% is recycled, only 10%. And then the leakage of the plastic into the oceans is about more or less 10% as well, about 620,000 million tons every year, so it's quite a lot. Of course, it is quite complex. Infrastructure is not there, regulatory is in place but not being imposed. Consumers awareness is still low. It's quite complex issue. But for us in Danone, because we use plastic as well as our packaging, with many good reasons, especially quality, logistic, this kind of things. We are trying to reduce as much as possible the footprint and also the impact of our packaging. Again, everything has to be with a certain target, with the KPI. Our target is to push more on reusable model, because this is something that we have to push and now becoming a movement. First, reusable model. And then if it is single use, then we have to minimize the use of natural resources, especially fossil. So means we have to push more on recycle material if this is the single use. And then the remaining, because there are still some material which is non-recyclable, we have to be able to recycle it to be recyclable, and then recovery. This is the last part. But we must have the ambition to be zero waste to the landfill. Actually, we have kind of big containers, 19 liters.
Oh, that's for the dispensers, is it?
Yeah, for the dispenser.
Okay.
This is actually 70% of our business. I would say that we are the largest reusable model for water and beverage in the world. So we are the largest. With every day, more or less 2 million of jugs, going around from our factory to the consumers every day. It's quite massive operations. And then with this kind of model, every year we are able to minimize plastic, single-use plastic. We do kind of calculation with the university, approximate 150,000 tons. So it's quite a big number, to be honest. 150,000 tons plastic that we avoid because of the reusable model. So then, of course, we have still 30%, which is still on the single use, like this packaging. So for this packaging, we aim to be using 100% of recycled material. So there will be kind of less plastic that coming from the fossil. So this is basically our ambition or our target. Now, of course, some packaging already use 100% of material, but some still less than 100. I would say 25% in average, but we will reach 50% by 2027. And then gradually we move towards 100% of recycled material, so that with this model, the use of fossil-based packaging, it will be minimum. Then it will be minimizing also our packaging goes into the environment. But of course, I understand that, because I have also many conversation with our friend, like an NGO and also the consumers. They still see our packaging in the environment, in the river, for example. Yeah, I would say yes. I recognize this, because at the end we cannot do kind of a collection only for our bottles. At the end, any bottles which is the same category, the same material as us, we collect, even our competitors' bottle. What does it mean here? It means that we must have this kind of initiative collectively. So other company has to do the same like us, so that we do kind of collective actions, so that the impact will be bigger. Because imagine like every company doing similar to us, definitely the impact on the bottle leakage to the environment will be minimum. Because we in Danone, we collect our competition bottle or other brands bottle, right? And then through our network, they do the same. They also collect our bottle, and other competitor also doing the same. So that it will be kind of collective action. Then definitely, I truly believe we are able to minimize the packaging leakage to the environment. So this is more or less.
Okay, and if you collect the competitors' bottles, you also use that in recycling, or do you?
Yes. This bottle perhaps made of maybe 10 type of I would say 10 brands, or even our competitor bottles is in this bottle.
Okay,
definitely, as long it is the same materials. This is PET. Then regardless Danone Aqua or others, we are able to recycle it.
So you mentioned currently how much recycled material you use in your bottles?
In our bottle now, average still 25%.
25%, and you're going to get to 50 by
2027. Why still 25%? There are many reasons. First, about the capacity of the recycling industry, food grade. There are many recycling industry in Indonesia, but mostly for the open loop purpose. For example, use it for other type of packaging used for textile, for example, mostly for the open loop, means that the quality can be lower than food grade. But for the food grade packaging, because it has to be fulfilling the FDA or halal certification, it is still minimum. But now there are many companies already investing in Indonesia on the recycling plant, so that we are able to get more materials. So this is the reason why. So I really believe that now the use of recycle is going to be mainstream in Indonesia.
Okay. And I presume because you talk about food grade FDA approval, I suppose this whole recycling thing is quite regulated, right? Are there other certifications or compliance issues with regard to this that you can talk about?
Yeah. Yes. Before I talk about the quality and also the compliance things, the point is that I really take the opportunity also to share that it is regulated, but actually in Indonesia there is already the regulations to brand owner to use recycled materials. The government already put kind of a target by 2029. Certain the industry has to use certain percent of materials.
What
recycled material?
What percent?
50%
By
2029. Quite ambitious. Yeah. We target 2027. Still ahead of the government. But the point is that it is not really being imposed. It is not really being implemented.
That's what I thought. I mean, that's
it is just
quite a high target.
Yeah, it's quite even. Yeah, to be honest with you, even this is similar. Like perhaps this is even beyond Europe.
Oh, okay.
I think Europe 50% by 2030, the industry.
Okay.
But for me, the point is that okay, fine, we have got ambitious target, but it has to be implemented. It has to be becoming mandatory. It is not just a regulatory without any kind of empowerment and impose to the industry to use it. Because now, and also the milestone, because at the end we cannot just put 2029 as a target without any milestone, right? We cannot just by 2029 switch to 50%. It has to be how much 2025, 2028, this kind of thing. But so far there is none. So therefore now in Indonesia, very limited company using recycled materials. I would say that only 2 or 3.
You said, but I suppose this because of cost, right? So what kind of cost does it add to your product if we use this?
Definitely. For the time being, recycled material is higher than virgin.
How much? I mean, can you give a number?
Can be more than approximate. Can be 20%.
20% on the material.
Yeah.
But how much does it add to your overall product?
I cannot recall, to be honest. But imagine this packaging mostly is
the cost is
mostly packaging. Definitely. So with the condition in Indonesia where I would say the use of recycled material is still at the voluntary basis, we are not at the same level of playing field with our competition, right? Definitely. At the end, we cannot sell more expensive. Consumer will not afford a more expensive product if in the shelf they find also the cheaper product. So therefore, regulation has been super important. And even us as an industry, we do also advocacy to government to impose or to implement this kind of regulations. Because we already use this recycled material since 2013. More than 10 years already. Without any voluntary, without any incentive and this kind of thing, but it is more on really our commitment to minimize the impact to the environment. So this is the situation. But I really hope that by together with big corp community, we can also doing kind of inspirations or advocacy or dialogue with many different stakeholders to move together to this kind of direction.
Well, I assume my colleagues in B Lab have intensely scrutinized everything you do, and that you actually have had good kind of positive influences on what you do, that you can get your B Corp certification and earn additional points in time. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at the end of the day, really, the regulations have to make it mandatory. Otherwise, it's not gonna.
I would
happen.
say yes.
Yeah.
I may agree on this one.
So, look, I mean, it's been a wonderful journey, B-Lab, working with you, and it's been such a pleasure. What else can we do? I mean, if we can somehow help or get involved to collaborate with Danone in making all these things happen quicker.
Yes. Because the Big Corp movement in Indonesia, I would say, quite early, still at the early stage. But I'm really happy that now we are growing this movement, becoming more and more companies joining Big Corp.
Yeah.
But I think what we can do is let's really use this kind of movement, because we see that Big Corp is a movement. This is something that different with other certification. We are really a community. We should be able to move things together. But in order to move things together, we should first, we must have the same visions, which is, I believe, being Big Corp, I believe we have the same visions, right? Using the business to force for good, for example. And then the second point is we must have kind of a trust each other. We must have a trust that you are a good company, you are trying to be good, and you are trying to create a better impact.
Yeah.
This is very important, because if we don't trust, then I don't think that we are going to move forward.
I hope that B Corp certification gives that trust, because somebody else is checking out what they do, and it's not just kind of a talk and greenwashing.
Yeah, exactly. That. Yeah, from there, then let's really align what we are going to achieve, and then we play our part and we play our role in which part that we in Danone can play, and which part from our other Big Corp company can play, and also the B-Lab can also play, and then we move together. And then again, we have to do it collectively, because this is something that we can create kind of attentions, from the relevant stakeholder, for example, like government or other relevant stakeholders, so that our dream or our ambition to really create goodness, especially in Indonesia, is going to happen.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, the movement has grown. I think when Danone Aqua was certified in 2018, if I can recall, I think at that time probably there were in Southeast Asia maybe 20 companies certified. Probably less.
In Indonesia, 15. Indonesia only 2.
Only 2, yeah. And I think Singapore was like 7, and then so that means maybe it's kind of like less than 15, right?
Yeah.
So today there are more than 100, and it's growing, quite exponentially. And globally, of course, in 2018, I can't remember the number, but I'm pretty sure it was very much less than 3,000 globally. Today, I think it's approaching 9,000 companies globally. So it's kind of like grown very exponentially also. And I think at some point in the last few years, I mean, there were so many companies coming in that it was a pipeline was just clogged up, and many companies had to wait a long time. But thankfully today, I mean, it's not so bad anymore.
Yeah, great.
So we look forward to anything that we can do.
Yes.
We're also growing our presence out here in Southeast Asia. And we really do hope that we can work together and make all these things happen.
Yes, thank you. And we really committed to to really work together with you, and then to drive this movement together.
Thank you so much, Karyanto.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.